we'll come to the last one now, and this is going to be mine. And so here's my point I'm going to say, which is I've purposely picked it for the ugly section, and it is blameF signing that massive extension with Astralis. Because one, if people don't know, it will never make sense to actually sign. This might sound counterintuitive. It will never make sense to sign a long contract in Counter-Strike. Are you ready? Unless you actually incredibly cynically believe the market will die during your contract being signed. And if so, spoiler, then your team might fold and you might never get the money anyway. So I actually genuinely think there's almost no way to justify doing a long contract there. What blameF has done, basically, is he's done a contract like he plays in a massive American sport, and now the joke is he's beaten us all. He's guaranteed himself $100 million for the next 5. He hasn't. What he's done is he's guaranteed himself what he can legally extract from Astralis for like however many more years. And the problem with that is two-part. One, I actually think, if anything, blameF's the one making the worst part of this contract. Like, I actually think he could be in a better team than Astralis. Like we talked about earlier, like, I don't see why he... By the way, if I had controlled the rosters, why wouldn't I put blameF onto Heroic and just have that production every fucking game? Like, that would be step one of how I'd try and make them a champion. So, to me, I think he's actually done himself. I know to all the fans of Astralis, they're going to think it's brilliant. Like, awesome, we've got blameF. Like, one, I don't even know that he'll be in IGL in 5 years or whatever. And then two, I actually think he's in his individual prime. So I think it's kind of a waste. And then thirdly, like I say, unfortunately, with the way esports works now, it might not even actually make that much sense financially. Like, there's a world whereas for everyone else, the best thing that could happen to the scene would be like, you know, the scene like 10X's in 2 years. That would actually be the worst thing that could happen to blameF. He'd be mega fucked on his contract then. So I think people just think it's sports when they see those extensions. Like, oh, brilliant for everyone. It's like, not always. It's complicated on those ones for me. So where are you guys at on this move here? That's why I put in ugly. It's not bad or good. It just depends on how you look at it.
I think it's part of like the Astralis philosophy, though, right? Like they kind of want to be seen as this sporting team.
Yes.
Like they did it for Glaive and Zip too. Like I think they just like the idea of long contracts. And the Glaive and Zip one, that was Glaive and Zip doing a runner on them. And I think this time maybe
Indeed.
the balance is more towards Astralis, just because like having basically the best Danish rifler for me anyway, like just locked down for 2 years, like that's a long time to have him locked down for. And you are kind of like, if you're like a Danish fan, you're kind of rooting for Heroic to go bust and somehow merging the two teams. And I don't know what blameF's logic is, because I do think that like we like it was kind of my point as well, but we're kind of heading in this international direction. And I think blameF to win majors, and I think he is good enough to win majors. Like but is he going to be able to do it on Astralis? Like unless something crazy happens to Heroic or there's crazy new talent or something, like you're kind of worrying for that element of it. And yeah, these long contracts just, they don't make sense. It's the same reason that people, when they talk about age as well, like in esports, it just doesn't make sense the same way. Like your peak is a way shorter amount of years than people assume. Like how many players have actually peaked for longer than like 3-4 years? Like it's a very, very short amount of players. It's like the absolute greats. So a 2-year contract is like, that's like equivalent of what Chelsea are doing in football, signing people on like 9-year deals.
Yes.
Like that is the length of difference in esports as it is to sports. Like this is, I think it's probably agents playing a part as well, because it's just the guaranteed money part of it. And I think people see longer contracts as more professional just because of the sports analogies, when in fact they probably aren't actually better for the scene.
Yeah, I mean, if I were to advise blameF, I probably wouldn't have said to sign. Well, to 2025 to me it's not the, because this article came out 4 days ago and it's signing through 2025, the end of 2025. So it is 2 years long, essentially 2 years and some change, I'd say. So that's a bit long for someone like blameF when you're at such a point in your career that it actually seems like he could be contesting for a spot on a really big roster very soon that's better than Astralis. Like, this is a guy that I don't really see why. Also, if you're a team like, say, G2 or Vitality, you wouldn't want this guy also. Like, there's no reason that any team couldn't get a boost with their worst player out and blameF in. Like, obviously not role for role, that's always going to work, but like, he's actually proven that he's actually a pretty solid in-game leader. Maybe they don't want to necessarily do that for, say, a Vitality. Like, you don't want to swap him out for Apex, but if you put him in for, honestly, Flames or Magisk, he's not bad. For ENCE, he could be on any of those, but I don't think he'd actually, the pay probably wouldn't be any different for ENCE. In fact, it might even be worse. So if I'm blameF here, I get why he does it, actually. I'll give a little bit of credit to him, I'd say that if you're a Danish person and you have a chance to sign for a multi-year deal with Astralis, and to us, we know that it is a bit long in this industry, but for him, and probably in terms of the influences around him saying, oh yeah, just a 2-year contract, if it's not working out that well, it's just 2 years or whatever, because to normal people and normal people that watch at regular sports, you don't think that's that crazy. Like a 2-year deal seems like, like the minimum deal is usually a season, which is 1 year. So I'm not entirely opposed. I would have wanted this to happen, though, with like maybe one more piece for Astralis, because like you're saying, Nero, with the fact that blameF is good enough to be competing on championships, I think blameF is easily good enough that if he's your second best player on a team, you should have major aspirations or major winning aspirations, and that's the case. Device is the best player on the team right now, and if he's on for a while, if you have blameF, you pretty much just need a supporting cast that you can trust in, and I will say that's where Astralis falls really short right now. The Boar Upstairs Buzz trio, to me, is probably the worst trio in the top 10, excluding Gamer Legion, if you even want to say they're a top 10 team. So that's, you would want a little bit more behind that, and putting your faith into an organization like Astralis is pretty tricky given everything that we've heard behind the scenes about this organization as a whole. So I kind of do get it, though. It does feel like you're probably signing with a big name team like the Lakers or something like that. Even if the team's in turmoil, you're still at the end of the day wearing a jersey that's going to be really respected by fans. And so public perception of you can be that you're the best player on their favorite team. And for that reason, you're going to have a huge upswing in terms of just your influence.
By the way, before we end, no, go on, jump in.
Well, I was going to say, it's also that thing of like re-signing now kind of, it implies that his deal's probably going to run out soon, and that kind of adds a whole new element of like is now the time to re-sign? Like if you're like a really ruthless agent, you're saying wait until after Copenhagen, wait until opportunities to change come, because you need to be able to negotiate from a position of strength and say to Astralis, right, like if Shush and testers are available, you just have to go for them, something like that. Like you need to really play, and I don't know what has gone on, but it kind of seems like, oh, your contract's up in a few months, you want to just sign another one. That's what it kind of feels like has happened. And I just think, I don't know, like he maybe needs, he's a big enough player and a big enough asset to Astralis that he could have maybe got a little bit more out of it by waiting a little bit.
I would just say on that, I think essentially he's too nice a guy. He's just not a really cerebral thinker, is my actual opinion on this topic. Because the issue is, I've actually had this happen a few times without naming names. There's been some really good players who, similar scenario, they're like right in the peak of their career. They're going to have next couple of years basically should be the best contract they sign. And I've had ones where they told me like, I'm just going to sign with the same team though, because, we're going to run it back. And I'm like, oh, no, but wait till like free agency begins and then just sign with them. And they were like, no, but I want to sign with the same team though. And I go, well, yeah, but we'll still sign with them, but we're going to check what the other teams. And then they go, no, but you don't understand. If I don't sign now, they might think I don't want to sign with them. And I'm like, that's a good thing. Yes, we want that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take all the offers, compare them, right, and push your offer up, and then we'll sign with them still. And they were like, yeah, but in the end, what? I'll be on the same team. It's like, you know what? This is why get an agent in here to fucking wreck this guy. Now I see why agents are where they are, mate, because like you won't believe how many players are like that, are just utterly fucking like, what's mad is it means even when they follow football, they're not actually paying attention like what goes on with those deals. They must think like, oh, why was he holding out? Didn't he want to join? It's like, yeah, for more money. Like, it's a fucking negotiation, innit? So that's one thing that does kill me a little bit, but sadly loads of pros will be like that. Essentially, as long as the money's like similar to what they got now and they want to be on this team right now, might even just be right now, by the way, not even in a year, just right now they want to play for them, loads of them will just re-sign. In fact, they'll even be so dumb, like you're saying, they'll flip it the other way and think they're getting an advantage. Like, oh, but I've signed now. I didn't have to go through like an free agency. It'd be really stressful, wouldn't it? I just signed now before my deal ended. It's like, well, now you'll never know that, like, for all you know, maybe FaZe was going to offer you like twice the money or something mental, Like, you can't know, but the point is you can now never know. You'll never even give them a chance to do that. And I can even say that's one of those areas where it wouldn't matter now because of how bad the current like investment scenario is. But a few years ago, especially, a lot of big names have shot themselves in the foot with those ones, by the way. Like the amount of times I actually had teams on the level of like a Team Liquid or a G2 where like they would have potentially done like an out of nowhere massive offer for someone, but the player didn't even give them the chance to and just immediately like secretly signed, like without even, remember in CS we don't even have fucking poaching laws. Like you can even just tell people, like in a month my contract ends, like if you want to bid, but they don't even do that, sadly. The one thing I did want to end on is I did actually have a question before we end. It's kind of like at the beginning when I asked you about this Nero, which is, What do you actually think about blameF then? This is obviously a play you've done some dives into on some of the tech stuff. Because one thing, like you referenced yourself, was obviously if I told everyone, oh, you know, blameF, and they were like, yeah, that big beta. I was like, yeah, that big beta, just like Case Serrato and Frozen. They'd all go, yeah, excuse, like that James Franco gif, like, yeah, what, excuse me? Like they'd all go fucking mental, mate, if you dared say those two names. So here's the question: is blameF a beta? One, two. Actually, what do you think of him as a player? Like, does he play it too much? Does the style work for him? What's your take on that topic? Because as I referenced, the two names we just mentioned there, some people think are the absolute best players in the world at the rifle, right? So, how does he get into this category?
I mean, I think he has to lose a little bit just from the baiting, but that's like the exact profile you kind of want from a star rifler. Like all these star riflers love to eco frag for their confidence and things like that. It's not just for stats. Like blameF isn't doing this for PR reasons. Like he knows everyone thinks he's a beta and he still does the eco fragging. Like it's I think he's actually underrated by most of the community just because of the sheer output he has is ridiculous. Like the amount of kills and damage this guy puts out, and even when you do look at like the Forbidden Leafy rating, like he checks out on that as well because he is always like, okay, so he's not like a huge risk taker very often, but what he is doing is improving his team's chance of winning like pretty much every single round because he's not someone who makes loads of mistakes, and I know that's a playstyle thing. But there are times like recently this Astralis team, I've seen a lot of times where he has kind of taken the bull by the horns. Like I think it was an ancient game nearly overtime, and then he just got two or three picks in a row, like from 12-15 down or something, got them to overtime, and then I think it was a Cologne one. It was a Cologne ancient game, and he is willing to do that now. Like he is willing to kind of be the star rifler, but yeah, he's obviously going to be naturally more cautious than a lot of other star riflers. But we don't come at Rops for being a bit of a patient lurker. Like we don't come at other players for the way they get their numbers as much as we go for blameF. And I know it's because you're watching it and everyone knows you're eco fragger in your matchmaking game and you get annoyed at them. But like this is the professional Counter-Strike scene, and this is his profile of being one of the best trade fraggers that I've ever seen in CS. Like he does not miss a trade frag, and that's such an important skill to be that good at that I think he is actually quite underrated as a player. And I will, all of my friends hate him, everyone I speak to hates him, but I will just defend him to the hilt because just if you're getting 25 kills a game, you're a good player, and I don't care.
Here's the thing, I sort of know what they don't like. It's like the VP thing. I know why they don't like his style. Yeah. The reason I find that crazy, though, Nero, is like, have you ever looked with your fucking eyes? The guy's skills are really cracked out, though. Like, he's really fucking good at shooting people in the game. Like you say, like, I've always said this. It's only baiting if you, to me, baiting's derogatory. Like, it's not actually baiting if you trade. Like, that's a fundamental part of the game. Like, that's actually good. It's why no one ever did call, even though now people might mean they did, no one ever actually called Cold Zero a beta. What he did was just correctly trade and then win the fucking round. Like, everyone just called him, you know what, the best. Like, that's how you're supposed to play it at one point in time. Just wondering what you thought. Do you have any final thoughts on blameF, Maui?
I think that Semphis had a really, really great line, though, about the eco-frag stuff, is that with how good people are nowadays, especially with pistols, it's just that, you know, if you can get a guy that's always going to get the eco-frags, maybe go 3-for-1 on that, like 3-for-1 KD against pistols, even when he has a rifle, that's good, because so many people are so good at deagling nowadays, or even using a Tech 9 or P250 to find that one cheeky kill, that if blameF feels pretty impervious on those kinds of rounds, and sure, he farms them, but it's also that, you know, he's not dying, so that's good. That's good for your team. That's good for your economy. I'd rather have blameF fighting five pistols than Borup fighting 5 pistols. I've seen Borup mess that shit up. I've seen him throw a molly at their feet and then they run through it and he doesn't get a single kill. So put blameF in the front. Let him get the eco frags so that Borup doesn't fuck it up.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.